You wake up already behind. Before your feet touch the floor, you have checked 3 feeds, scanned the metrics, and measured your whole life against strangers who seem to be winning at it. The culture you live in has one commandment: optimize, hustle, monetize, become more. And yet the more you chase it, the emptier the finish line looks, because there is always another finish line. Now imagine someone told you that a small book of scattered conversations, written down 2,500 years ago by the students of a failed, unemployed government advisor, contains a quieter and far older answer to exactly this exhaustion. Not a productivity hack, not a morning routine, a whole different question. The question the modern world asks you is, what have you achieved? The question this book asks is, what kind of person are you becoming? Its author spent most of his life looking like a loser by every standard we would recognize, passed over for the jobs he wanted, wandering from state to state, offering advice nobody in power would take, dying convinced he had failed. And then his students remembered his words, and those words outlasted every emperor who ignored him, and quietly became the operating system of half of human civilization. This is the Analects of Confucius, and it is the original self-improvement manual, except its idea of self-improvement has almost nothing to do with success and almost everything to do with character. Over the next 20 minutes, I want to show you why a burned-out, over-optimized world keeps rediscovering a teacher who told people, gently, to stop climbing and start cultivating. First, who wrote it, and why it barely looks like a book at all. Confucius, the Latinized name of Kong-Q, was born around 551 BCE into a China breaking apart. It was the twilight of the Zhou dynasty, an age of small warring states, collapsing loyalties, and casual brutality, and he grew up poor after his father died young. He became a teacher and something new for his time. He took students regardless of whether they were rich or nobly born, asking only that they be serious. He longed for a real political post where he could put his ideas to work, held minor offices, then spent years traveling from ruler to ruler, and was politely turned away by all of them. He never got the power he wanted. What he got instead was students who loved him. The Analects is not a treatise he sat down to compose. The title in Chinese, Lun Yu, means something like selected sayings or edited conversations. After his death around 479 BCE, his disciples, and then their disciples, gathered up what they remembered. A remark he made, a question a student asked, a moment he lost his temper, or laughed or fell silent, and stitched it together over generations. So it reads less like a system than like a notebook, or a family's memory of a beloved, exacting, sometimes funny old man. That texture matters. He is not handing down commandments from a mountain. He is thinking out loud, in a room, with people he is trying to make better. And the very first line of that notebook is not a rule at all. It is a question about joy. So here is the whole book in one sentence. Rather than chasing success, first cultivate yourself into a good person. Someone who loves to learn, who thinks about what they learn, who treats others the way they would want to be treated, and who keeps climbing, patiently, for a lifetime. That is it. Everything else is detail and example. The Analects does not promise to make you rich, powerful, or admired. It makes a stranger, and in our world, almost rebellious claim that the project of your life is not to acquire things, but to become someone, and that becoming that someone is available to anyone, prince or peasant, starting today with no money and no permission required. Confucius keeps turning your attention away from the ladder and back toward the person doing the climbing. Notice the very first words his students chose to open the book with. Not a warning, not a law, but this: "Is it not pleasant to learn with a constant perseverance and application?" He begins with delight, and he goes straight on. "Is it not delightful to have friends coming from distant quarters?" Learning and friendship, that is where a life well lived starts, before status ever enters the room. We will walk this in 5 beats, each an idea from the book set against a modern ache. 1. The joy of learning. 2. Learning and thinking together. 3. Ren, becoming fully human. 4. Do not do unto others. 5. The staircase of a life. 5 simple beats, and each one, I promise you, cuts against something the modern world has quietly sold you. First beat, the joy of learning. Remember that opening line, because everything hangs on it. Is it not pleasant to learn with a constant perseverance and application? Read it slowly. Confucius does not say learning is useful. He does not say it will get you promoted, or beat the algorithm, or build your personal brand. He says it is pleasant, a source of steady, renewable joy in itself. And that word, perseverance, matters just as much. This is not the dopamine hit of a viral fact, but the deep satisfaction of returning to something again and again until it becomes part of you. Now hold that against how we actually treat learning today. We have turned it into a race for credentials, a means to an end, another item to optimize. We hoard online courses we never finish and bookmark articles we never read, and the whole time a low anxiety hums underneath. Am I keeping up? Am I falling behind? We have made even self-improvement into another form of the hustle, and so, predictably, it burns us out. Confucius is pointing at a completely different relationship with knowledge. The real reward of learning, he insists, is not what you can trade it for. It is who you become while doing it. The person who studies to win something is always anxious because the prize is never quite enough. The person who studies for the sake of understanding is, quietly, already home. That is why he opens his notebook not with a threat, but with a pleasure. The takeaway is small and radical. Learn in order to become a fuller person, not in order to cash it in for something else. Do that, and the anxiety loosens, because there is nothing left to win. Second beat, learning and thinking must go together. There is a line in Book 2 that could have been written this morning, aimed straight at your screen. Learning without thought is labor lost. Thought without learning is perilous. Read it twice because Confucius has just diagnosed 2 opposite modern failure modes in a single breath. Learning without thought, that is us endlessly scrolling, swallowing information we never chew, saving the video, screenshotting the quote, consuming and retaining nothing. It feels productive. It is, in his blunt phrase, labor lost. Motion without nourishment. But he refuses to let the other side off the hook either. Thought without learning is perilous. That is the person who never reads, never checks, never studies, but is loudly certain about everything, running purely on gut and vibes. That is the confident take with no foundation under it, the hot opinion that has never met a fact. One habit leaves you full but hollow, the other leaves you bold but wrong. And notice the balance in this, because it is the whole Confucian temperament in miniature. He does not tell you to consume more, and he does not tell you to trust yourself and tune the world out. He tells you to do both, intention forever. Take the world in and then digest it. Think hard, but keep feeding the thinking with something real. In an economy built to maximize the time you spend consuming and the speed at which you react, this 2,500-year-old sentence is almost countercultural. The takeaway: hoard a little less, digest a little more. Every input needs a pause for reflection, and every strong opinion needs to go back and check itself against something true. Third beat: Ren, the art of becoming fully human. If the Analects has a center of gravity, this is it. The word is Ren, and it is famously hard to translate. Legge often renders it as virtue or perfect virtue. Others say benevolence, humaneness, goodness. The character itself is a picture of a person standing beside another person, and that is the clue to the whole idea. Ren is not a private glow of holiness you achieve alone on a mountain. It is what happens in the space between you and the actual people in your life. Here is the striking thing about how Confucius teaches it. Students ask him again and again to define Ren, and he almost never gives a definition. Instead, he answers each person differently, pointing at what that particular student needs to work on. Be respectful here, be sincere there, restrain yourself when you are with others. He refuses to turn goodness into an abstraction you can nod along to and forget. He keeps it concrete, lived, relational, measured entirely by how you treat the human being in front of you. Now set that against our moment. We live in the age of the personal brand, where being a good person has quietly become a thing you perform for an audience. The right opinions posted, the right causes tagged, virtue displayed at scale to people you will never meet. Confucius asks a harder and less flattering question. Never mind your audience, are you actually kind to the specific, inconvenient, ordinary people around you? The tired colleague, the family member, the stranger who cannot do anything for you. The takeaway: character is not what you broadcast, it is how you treat the person who happens to be standing next to you. Fourth beat: do not do unto others. If Ren sounds too large to hold, Confucius gives you a way to carry it in your pocket. A disciple once asked him whether there was a single word that could serve as a rule of practice for a whole life, one principle you could actually live by. And Confucius offers something close to it, the heart of what he called reciprocity. What you do not want done to yourself, do not do to others. Sit with how the golden rule is framed here, because the shape of it is easy to miss. We usually know the sunny, active version. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Confucius states it in the negative, and the negative is quieter, humbler, and in some ways wiser. He is not commanding you to go out and fix everyone. He is asking you, before you act, to pause and run one simple test. Would I want this done to me? The whole of morality compressed into a single act of imagination, climbing for one moment into the other person's seat. And think about where we have most forgotten how to do that. Online, we treat strangers as content, as targets to dunk on, pile onto, screenshot and mock, precisely because we never have to picture ourselves on the receiving end. Reciprocity is the exact muscle that public shaming switches off. Confucius hands it back to you as a habit small enough to actually use. Not a grand philosophy of the good, but a hinge you can turn 100 times a day. The takeaway: before you speak, post, or act, sit for 1 second in the other person's chair. Ethics can start that simply. Fifth beat. The staircase of a life. Near the start of the book, Confucius looks back and describes his own development, and it is one of the most quietly beautiful passages in world literature. At 15, I had my mind bent on learning. At 30, I stood firm. At 40, I had no doubts. And it keeps climbing. At 50, he knew the decrees of heaven. At 60, his ear was open to truth. And only at 70, he says, could he follow what his heart desired without ever crossing what was right. Look at the timeline. It took this man, the wisest teacher his civilization produced, 55 years to reach the point where doing what he wanted and doing what was right were finally the same motion. He does not present growth as a breakthrough, a hack, or an overnight transformation. He presents it as a staircase, slow, sequential, taken 1 decade at a time. Now think about what our world does to that idea. Social media is a machine for manufacturing milestone anxiety. Everyone's highlight reel, the 30 under 30 lists, the peers who seem to have arrived while you are still figuring it out. It compresses a whole life into a single frantic sprint you feel you are already losing. Confucius offers the opposite picture, and it is a deeply kind one. Maturity has stages. You are not supposed to have it all by 30. Standing firm at 30, losing your doubts at 40. These are not late, they are on time. The takeaway is a permission slip most of us never got. Self-cultivation is a lifelong staircase, not a 100-meter dash. You are not behind. You are simply, like everyone who ever grew, still climbing. So what does all of it add up to? Pull the 5 beats together and a single coherent vision appears. Confucius takes the exhausting modern question, "How do I win?" and quietly replaces it with a better one. How do I become someone worth being? He starts with the joy of learning, not as a tool for status, but as a lifelong pleasure. He insists that learning and thinking need each other, so you become neither a hollow hoarder of facts nor a confident fool. He points at Ren, locating your whole worth not in what you broadcast, but in how you treat the actual people beside you. He hands you reciprocity. Do not do to others what you would hate done to you, as a rule small enough to use 100 times a day. And he shows you your own life as a staircase, decade by decade, so you can stop panicking about being behind. Notice what is missing from that list. There is no wealth, no fame, no power, no optimization, no arriving. The man who wrote it never got the position he spent his life chasing, and by the standards of his age, he died a failure. But he had built the one thing his age could not take from him, a self worth living inside. That is the strange, stubborn promise of this book. In a civilization that has spent 3,000 years accumulating and losing empires, the thing that survived was not a conquest. It was a quiet argument that the real work of a human life is happening not out there on the ladder, but in here, in the slow shaping of who you are. Here is the one thing to carry out of this book and into your week. Pick a single ache you already feel, the low, humming anxiety that you are not doing enough, not achieving enough, not keeping up. And try, just for a few days, swapping the question underneath it. Instead of asking at the end of the day, what did I get done? What did I gain? How did I compare? Ask instead, in Confucius's spirit, what kind of person was I today? Was I a little more patient? Did I actually learn something and sit with it, rather than just consuming and forgetting? Did I treat the people around me the way I would want to be treated? It sounds almost too simple to matter, but that swap is the entire revolution of this book, and it quietly dismantles the machine that burns you out. The hustle can never be satisfied because there is always more to acquire and someone further ahead. Character can be tended today in one small act with nothing but your own attention. So this week, when you feel that familiar pull to measure your worth by your output, remember the unemployed old teacher who died thinking he had failed, and whose real answer to burnout was not to work harder or to give up, but to turn the whole question inward. Not what have I achieved, but who am I becoming? You do not need a promotion, a platform, or permission to start. As he told his students at the very first line, "Is it not pleasant to learn with a constant perseverance and application? Begin there, today, for its own sake, and let the rest go quiet." Confucius spent a lifetime making one patient, radical case: that the point of being alive is not to win the world's game, but to slowly become a decent, thinking, humane person, and that this work is open to anyone, starting now and never quite finished. He offered no shortcut and promised no arrival, only a staircase and the company of friends and books along the way. 25 centuries later, in the most over-optimized, exhausted, comparison-poisoned age humans have ever built, that turns out to be exactly the medicine we keep reaching back for. If this walk through the Analects gave you something worth keeping, subscribe. A new classic every week, faithfully, in about 20 minutes. Next time we cross the ocean and centuries to a grim Puritan village in colonial New England, and Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter, a story about a public shaming, a badge you are forced to wear, and the respected man who got away with it, and what it says about the way we still pile onto the guilty today. And tell me in the comments, if you swapped, what did I achieve today, for who was I today? What is the first thing that would change about your week? I read every reply.